The Borderlands franchise means so much to me.
Games are a lot of hard work, and it's easy to when you just go to a store and pick it up, to kind of not understand the scope and scale of effort it takes to do a game. So anyone who's shipping a game these days, it's an accomplishment just to recognize that what you're playing is, the result of hundreds, if not thousands of people's hard work and dedication, and always wanting to do the best.
This week so far has been mostly just running around like mad, trying to make sure all of our live content is where it needs to be.
It's been intense, but in a good way. I'm very proud of the game the team has rallied behind and been able to deliver. I think we have the best Borderlands game.
Joy and happiness is a valuable thing, but man, it's not, you can't just wish it into existence. And for this weird new medium we've got, it takes a lot of people and a lot of time to make something that has the depth and gravity and width and meaning that is necessary to be a premium AAA video game. This is just how it has to be. And it's wild, we're literally getting judged as we speak. And the market decides. I was working with these guys, friends of mine that I'd worked with at 3D Realms, and a couple of them got fired, and the 3D Realms bosses called them rebels and boat rockers. And so they started a company called Rebel Boat Rocker. And I liked them. I joined up with those guys, and we had a startup and a bunch of friends that were really great game makers. We were all giving that a shot. And didn't work. It was very difficult. We were taking every risk, building a new game, creating a new engine, building a new IP, and building a company all at the same time. When our game got canceled, Electronic Arts was our publisher and canceled our product, I'm like, okay, what do I do next? I looked around and I talked to everybody and got a whole bunch of job offers. But I don't know, maybe I was just young and cocky, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I knew something. I thought, I think I can do it better than joining any of these guys. So, I called up some of the folks that I had respected the most that I'd been working with and asked them if they wanted to kind of come along and let's get this thing going. And I remember we sat around my dining room table in my house trying to figure out what to call this company. And I came up with the idea, first I proposed Skinner Box. B.F. Skinner was a psychologist, and a Skinner box, it's a box that's got an electrified floor and a food dropper that if the scientists press a button, it'll make the food drop automatically, make the lever press and the food drop. If it presses another button, it'll make the floor electrify. And then it kind of quickly occurred to me that was probably too smart. It's probably too a step removed. But for some reason, this was 1999, and I really liked the idea of a box. I don't know. This is before the Xbox. This is before anybody started putting box on everything. So maybe I was just part of that, why that happened. There was a collective zeitgeist going. But the idea of a Gearbox sounded pretty neat to me because they're beautiful. And there's design there. But it also, they're beautiful. It's a machine that has a very specific purpose. But when you look at the gears working and you look at the mechanics of a gearbox, it's also art in a way. And I liked that. And I liked the idea that for it to function, all of the pieces have to work well together. And it's sort of this nexus between like art and science, and how lots of different components have to function perfectly well together in order to be effective. And so when that idea came in, I just couldn't let it go. And so I just kept, hammering on it until, the guys that I founded the company with that all came along with me, I think they would have gone along with anything I would have just put my foot down on, but I wanted it to be like sincere, like we're building shared values here. We're building a foundation around our mission and our values and our identity. And I didn't want to just have that be, if it's purely dictatorial, it's not real. It has to actually be absorbed and embraced and loved by everyone involved in order for it to be a real part of a culture. And so that was kind of the beginning.
Now I've heard rumors that you troops may not actually be here to rescue us. Just don't forget about us out there, alrighty? Okay, I'll let you through now.
And we had everybody coming to my house, and there was 5 of us. I say everybody, like it's like a big deal. There were 5 of us. We were talking about what to do, and it's like, we took every risk with Rebel Boat Rocker. We're gonna have to build a company, but maybe we don't make an engine. Maybe we don't make an IP. And Half-Life had just launched, and so I had this idea that maybe we do like a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead kind of thing with Half-Life, where you have a parallel story going on simultaneously that we know must have took place because we played Half-Life, but we didn't see that experience, the point of view of one of the soldiers in Black Mesa. And everybody loved it. And so we started talking about it, that would be a good target. And I don't know how. I don't believe in manifestation. I believe in coincidence. Literally that afternoon, with no action on my part, Gabe Newell calls me. And because he had heard that we had left Rebel Boat Rocker and that I was starting a new thing, and he wanted to see if we would be interested in working on Half-Life. So I just immediately got on a plane and flew up there and pitched him and the team on what was Opposing Force, what became Opposing Force, and they loved it. And then they said, sorry, we don't actually own Half-Life. You got to drive down the street to Sierra Online and talk to the publisher. We're going to call them and tell them you're coming and tell them we think what you've got is cool, but you got to sell them. They're the ones that are going to have to pay for anything and agree to do it, because technically at that time, it was actually the publisher, Sierra, that owned the Half-Life intellectual property. And so I had to drive down the street and then pitch them everything. And what's funny is I think everybody in the room that I pitched later ended up going to work for Valve, which is hilarious. But yeah, and then we did it and got the deal done by April of 1999. That was our first, Gearbox's first commercial video game was Half-Life Opposing Force. In May of 1999, I brought a demo of our game to the floor of E3. Sierra made a little booth, and we had a kiosk and a station set up, and I literally just brought the code with me, loaded it onto the PC myself on the show floor, and just demoed the first levels I'd built for Half-Life Opposing Force. At that point, the team was probably 7 people. And that was like a month after we closed the deal, which had been 3 months into us working on it. And then, we shipped that game later that year, and the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences gave us Action Game of the Year, which was impossible because we were up against Unreal Tournament and Quake 3 Arena and Rainbow Six. Why is our dumb little Half-Life game gonna win this? But that's how we got started, and that was our first thing.
No, I don't want to die.
I loved playing adventure games and role-playing games and turn-based kind of experiences back when I was younger. When I started with computers, I was doing like text-based adventures, right, which are, I guess, turn-based if you think about it, where you type something in, and if the parser understands what you typed, you'll get a response, and you can try to explore a world or solve puzzles or whatever the adventure puts you on. And that leads to role-playing games where you have stats and there's monsters and you want to get loot and get stronger. And the kinds of rewards, the kind of gratification and the kind of stimulation that I got from playing games like that back in the early days was kind of a long-term kind of thing, right? It's not like the thrill I'd get when I'd hop on my skateboard and ride down the hill. Right, that's like in the moment, like you're just feeling adrenaline, you know, when you're on a roller coaster, adrenaline. This is a different kind of sense of experience of reward and gratification and motivation, right? It's like, if I do the X, Y, and Z right, I will get stronger. I can get more powerful. I can get a better sword or a better gun or whatever it is that the game has in it, you know? And the things that are hard now will become easier later, and that feels awesome. And there's this combination of the freedom with the growth that really is satisfying, but it's long term. It's not in the moment to moment. It's not the adrenaline because you're flying downhill. It's in this, I'm gonna work on a thing, achieve it, and then get the consequences of that achievement that makes things better and easier and more fun, right? And that's the only thing I knew and understood and loved about video games for a long time. And in fact, I almost had an aversion to, I played the arcade games. I played Space Invaders and Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and all that. And I'd, borrow cash from my parents' wallets to go change it in for quarters at the pizza shop down the street so that I can, play the arcade games that they had there. For some reason in that period, I almost had a lower respect for that kind of fast limbic kind of reward system. I almost had I don't want to say disrespect, but I didn't have the same love for those moment-to-moment action games that I did for those big, immersive, long-term kind of growth and reward and exploration kind of games. And then Apogee and id Software released Wolfenstein 3D. And the combination of seeing the world from the first-person perspective and having it be fast, like I can just, this is a whole different kind of freedom. And that freedom of movement and exploration and just being in that world as like me, I'm seeing through the eyes of the character. That was really powerful. And then with the gameplay that was on top of it, where, oh my God, they're trying to kill me and I gotta dodge this incoming stuff. And at the same time, I'm trying to make their health go down and knock them down while they're trying to make my health go down and knock me down. And this target game that we're playing back and forth, it's like extremely high energy, like gnarly hits of dopamine and adrenaline instantaneously. And it just, I don't know, my brain just sort of renewed my love and respect for what an action game could be and what that game was specifically. And it kind of changed my worldview. And it was not long after that, it was like while I was playing Wolfenstein, where it's like the world kind of parsed these as two different universes. Like there's the role-playing game over here, and that's one whole thing. And in a million miles away, there's Wolfenstein 3D over here, and that's a totally different thing. But I wasn't thinking about where the camera was or the controls, or I was just thinking about the feelings of the two different experiences, how in fact, they're not mutually exclusive at all. And if you can put the moment-to-moment feelings in the same space as this long-range kind of engagement that I get out of role-playing, then I'll have everything. That's the thing I want. So that's kind of when that started, is like the idea that the moment-to-moment fun of first-person action is not mutually exclusive to the long-term sense of accomplishment, reward that comes with growth and leveling up and all that you put in a role-playing game. These things are not mutually exclusive. And there had been a few folks flirting with, Ultima Underworld was kind of real time in the way the camera looked around, but it was basically a role-playing game, and it was almost turn-based in the way that you would play the interactions. It definitely was not that fast, smooth, visceral. It wasn't visceral like Wolfenstein was. So there were attempts to try to take that feeling of being there and putting you in it in a role-playing game. And there were other attempts of putting a little more depth onto the shooter. Like when the original two-dimensional Wolfenstein came out, like you didn't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guns that you did in Wolfenstein 3D. And then by the time Doom comes out, and then, of course I worked on Duke Nukem 3D, where we used the whole line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Every one of those buttons is a gun. And that's kind of, and you collect them. It's like, oh, these are like the rudiments of role-playing, like where I'm collecting gear. But Duke Nukem didn't level up. He was no different in what his power and capability was at the end of the game than he was at the beginning of the game. And that was a meaningful thing for me. So, in some ways it's kind of a continuum, but no one had actually gotten the formula right. And we couldn't start until we had enough credibility. We had to build our company and build some games and get some credibility. And we launched this game in 2005 called Brothers in Arms. And it was the first thing, I directed and produced that. And our team size, I think when we shipped, might have been 50 people, maybe. It was all original. We made everything. We made the IP, we made the game, we made it, we did it. We designed it, but we kind of borrowed the art style and obviously the backdrop, the story from the real world, from World War II. We didn't quite make everything. But because we succeeded there, A, we had some money, and B, we had lots of credibility that we could build IP and that we can create AAA video games. And we could do it on the consoles, not just PC. We could make it for multi-platform. And so that's when I kind of went for it and started a few things. One of the things was more Brothers in Arms. Another was like, well, there is this kind of foundation that we have where we work on other people's IP with other people's engines, and so I wanted to have a couple threads there, but let's start something weird, bold, and original, and that was Borderlands. And that was the moment. Okay, let's do this. Let's blend the RPG and the shooter together, and let's find our way. So that's how the Borderlands idea kind of began. And then, once you think to yourself, okay, we're gonna make a first-person shooter where you kill people and take their stuff. So we had to build a universe where that was a good thing. Like that's okay. Like we need you to be free. Freedom's a big part of that. The exploration's part of it. It kind of congealed from there, and so many brilliant people contributed so much. Like one of the cool things about Borderlands is it's not just me.
We knew the gameplay was there, and we loved, the guns and infusing this RPG side with action skills into a first-person shooter. Like that was all great, but the world kind of missed an identity. Once, the art team and Randy started exploring like alternate art styles, that's when it started to click.
Yeah, that was huge. It was a lot of fun, but also a lot of fear. It was a major shift in something we hadn't done before. As a studio, even, we had done mostly pretty realistic looking games. Brothers in Arms, was our main franchise that we had just come out with and was doing well. So that was very grounded looking, and we were moving into a new post-apocalyptic game, Borderlands, that was also more realistic looking than it was in later. And then it came kind of last hour. It was a kind of a last minute thing where the game tone style, the humor wasn't really lining up with the art style either. And we also just wanted to stick out in like a pretty crowded space of first person shooters. So it was just kind of a last-ditch effort to make it something special and something we're all really excited about, and it worked. But it still was a lot of fights.
The sum of a bunch of awesome creatives and this culture that we'd made, that in that context we can embrace everyone's creativity. So whatever part someone's responsible for, they can have their own freedom to explore and invent and create there. And it led us down some bad rabbit trails, but it also kind of let us discover what Borderlands was together as a team. And everything was great except for the world was kind of telling us that it was impossible to be commercially successful at the scale that we needed to be unless we were doing it with a realistic kind of art direction. And this was a problem because the realistic style directly countered the vibe of the design of the video game and the universe that we were creating to enable the design of the video game to work. And so it always felt wrong. we kind of bid at that a bunch of different ways, but at one point there were a handful of guys that just wanted to give it a shot to see if they can figure out, you know, so a couple of the artists and a level designer and a coder got together. I was working on something on the game, I don't remember what. And then somebody asked me, hey, have you seen what, I think it might have been, have you seen what Carl's been working on the last couple days? I'm like, what do you mean? Isn't Carl working on what he's supposed to be working on? And they're like, oh, I fucked up. So I'm like, Carl, what are you doing? He's like, man, you know, the whole like art thing, like I you know, me and Cole and some other people have been messing around, and like, I think we can figure this out. And I'm like, okay, good. So get these people together. I'll give you 2 weeks and figure it out. And then whatever you get in 2 weeks, then we'll make the judgment call. Because we're trying to get to alpha. Like we're burning money, and we're trying to make a game here. But it was a thing. It was a real problem, so I let them do it. And I remember when the time came for the meeting where they were going to demo what they had worked on, and I just felt so bad walking into that meeting. God, I'm such a yeah, it's true. It'd be nice to solve this, but it's kind of impossible at this stage. Like, we're very close to alpha. We need to just, you know, yeah, we have some money in the bank, but it costs a lot to do this. And we had some backing from our publisher, but you know, 2K was new back then, and you know, we were also taking a lot of risks, so they had a lot of uncertainty. They were making a bet, which was awesome, but you know, they're not in the business of losing money. And we were doing some risky stuff that a lot of people in the industry wasn't sure was going to work. So I felt so bad going into that meeting, because I thought, oh man, they wasted 2 weeks, and there's 5 really awesome guys working on it that could have been doing something else for that 2 weeks, something that would have helped us get, you know, closer to the goals we had. And B, they're now more attached to what they made. And this is like we all get, like, that's just part of creativity. Like, you commit yourself and invest yourself in what you're trying to do. And all of us are professionals here. Like, we all have had to shoot things in the head that we've loved, because you can't, it doesn't always work, but you have to try, you know? But I didn't want to be the one to have to crush them, because we didn't have a lot of time to recover. Like, we just said, like, we have to get back in the shit here, you know? It's like, sorry that happened, but we gotta work. And so I felt really bad that I was gonna have to kill this thing. And I shouldn't have let them get more invested in it. I should have killed it. I should have just put a stop to it before I let them have the 2 weeks. That was what I was thinking going into the meeting. And then I'm in the meeting, and they fired it up, and immediately I'm like, this feels right.
I mean, it still made me nervous. I hadn't been trying to shoot for that kind of stylization when I first got into my career. I actually wanted to go into film at first, so it was still like a stretch. But I was sitting next to a Borderlands 3 art director, Scott Kester, and he had his sketchbook of just wild, crazy characters. If you're familiar with his art style, it looks very graffiti-esque. And we were constantly talking about how it would be cool and fun to try and translate that stuff into 3D anyways. And when Brian Cousins and Brian Martell, the art directors, came and spoke to us about it, we right away knew what we wanted to do, because it was already, you know, ruminating in our minds, and something we were talking about just personally.
And then as I'm seeing more, I'm like, oh man, this is really cool. Like, there's nothing like this. Like, if we do this, no matter what happens from this point forward, that's the Borderlands look, and there's nothing else that looks quite like that. And that's really, really cool and valuable. But most importantly, it let everything else we were doing with the design and the universe feel right. And it was so immediately I was like, damn it. And then, so I was like, okay, can we do it? And
we actually like rebuilt 90% of the maps in BL1 in like 9 months. Only like, I don't even know the player facing name, but the Rack Hive map. And I feel like there was one other map were the only ones that like survived the art transition. The rest of the game was pretty much like rebuilt from scratch over that time. It was a pretty crazy time, but like we finally found our identity. We found out what it was to have like a Borderlands world, Borderlands characters and enemies. And so the world team back then, under my stewardship, we discovered Borderlands and we rebuilt it.
And one of the lucky things is while that group was doing that, we also attached this guy, Stephen Palmer, who's awesome. He paid really close attention to what was going on, what people were doing, and what it took in that 2-week span. And he was able to take that and extrapolate that to every other thing we had to make and all the assets of the game to build to build an actual model, a responsible, like mature, like grown-up model of what would it take to, if we actually decided to do this, what's that going to cost, and what's that do to affect the timeline? And we could do it. We could afford it. So, oh shit. So now I got to tell the publisher. Showed Christoph, who was the president of 2K Games at the time. And yeah, they dug it. They got on board. And that, if they didn't, I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, they were kind of on board. They were on board, like the marketing people that were definitely on board. The creatives were definitely on board. Christoph went with that. But at the same time, you know, we did do that alpha, and they failed our alpha on technical reasons. I'm like, we gotta just keep going. So I ended up personally financing the whole back half of Borderlands myself, you know, until like, hey, we now have we're gold with the consoles and we've released to manufacturing. You think we've passed alpha? Can you pay some of the milestones finally? You know.
And I actually think that is one of our strengths. We can deal with real dark and serious and you know, violent and scary things, but we still get to have a little bit of softer edge to it when we play it up. Like we had a term for it, we always called it Verhoeven, which is like you dial that up to like 11, so it's just ridiculous, and then it's actually fun again.
So it was like a crazy time, and I remember distinctly like, how the hell are we gonna do this and ship on time? But it was absolutely the right call, because obviously it created this like place for us that was like by itself, and then people could start to identify Borderlands through screenshots and videos and stuff. And up until then, you know, we looked very much like any other, you know, 360 era game that was kind of, I mean, we still have a lot of browns in BL1, but at least our inks and our art style still gave it its own perspective. The other thing I'll say is that even though before the art style, what we did latch onto was like a technology level for Pandora that did carry through past the art style change, as far as like what was the history of Pandora, and we were just able to realize that better because we were like, okay, this planet doesn't have trees. It's mostly a desert. It was abandoned by a corporation at one point. It was a jail at one point. So there's still a lot of stuff pre the art style that we built in terms of our own lore. But once the art changed, we had like an identity to like take those ideas and express them in the world. So like I said, it was a really crazy time, but it was absolutely like clearly the right call, and you know, we were able to kind of find ourselves through that art change.
Y'all have been working on this for 6 years. Like that's a significant portion of our lives.
So some of the initial duties for a senior project producer, going back 6 years, the first couple of things happen with, business and concept. What are we thinking about doing? Do we want to do a sequel to, a previous title? But really the first several months are about ideation and understanding, data gathering. I was the head of Borderlands 3 DLC, and so I oversaw in this capacity all of the DLC work that went in, all of the live events and patching, micro-patching and fixes. And so a lot of it is, people who are along with me and people who had just launched Borderlands 3, thinking about what are those things we want to improve on? What are the things that we know that we want to shoot for and push further on the next one? And just kind of ideating and jumping into a room and thinking about things like that along with the executive team and really anybody who has some good feelings about how can we take this into the next direction. As somebody in my position, I like looking at like our retrospectives and being able to see what do we think internally, our departments, how can we get better, how can we improve, what do we want to try to push and try to shoot higher for, and kind of getting that in line with what type of game we can make and what we want to be able to do for the next one.
So pre-production is actually my favorite time. That's whenever I feel like the art direction actually gets to have the most influence and really the most control. Like it starts out, there's kind of like a few different cycles that you go through as an art director, and pre-production is a time when you get to get your ideas out before most of the team is actually on it. So you do a lot of like world building, you do a lot of lore, making up cool stories in your head that may or may not actually make it into the game, but creating the rules that you can apply your art direction to the rest of the world. Because some people think art direction is supposed to be telling people what they're doing wrong or how to make their picture look better. But I feel it's actually more about trying to create rules for the world that make everything look a way to make you like you're backing up the story. Like if you want an area to be dark and moody, you can't just say make it darker. You gotta have reasons for why, because once you bring all those other artists in, they all have their own thoughts and their own ideas, and quite frequently they're way better even than the ideas I had. And you want to work those all in, but you got to have some kind of guidelines and some kind of like framework that everybody's building stuff inside of, so they understand what was cool and why it's cool, and you keep having to remind yourself of what it was you're after as you go through. And once you lose that, if you start to forget why it is that like you're making the things look the way they do, it makes it much harder to talk to someone about why they have to change something that they might have fallen in love with, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like you're making rules for the universe early on in pre-production, and then everyone else is getting to learn those rules and build on them with you during actual development.
At Gearbox, typically it's looking at the past successes and making sure we understand what made those things successful, then looking at the critiques and really understanding what the critiques are speaking to. You can say the story is bad. Okay, well, what does that really mean? Like, how is the story bad? Okay, your character doesn't feel involved in the story. These characters' dialogue was too grating. This character's action skill didn't feel good. Okay, well, what does feel good mean? Like, we go back and we kind of break down what's successful, what's not, and truly try to understand that. And then we set goals and kind of pillars. For BL4, I came out with like 5 pillar words. And as we started to establish all the features and how we were going to look at the seamless world and what the characters were going to do, and the feature set of like matchmaking even. How do all these features speak to these 5 core words, and do they make sense? Social was number 1, reward. And I always say reward is not just loot. Reward is exploring the world is fun. So that's coming across all those things I talked about as like a new side mission, finding a collectible, seeing something pretty. That can be rewarding by itself. Power / growth. I want to make sure that an RPG, I think, is important to feel power and growth, that you make a decision and you see your power change and you feel it. Choice, and so much so like consequential choice. Like that's why you make a choice with your skill point, you have to respec it if you don't like it, and you pay the cash. Same thing when you get to the end game, there's the specialization tree. You gotta spend a lot of iridium to respec your specialization tree, because I want there to be some consequence. And then the last one was badass. That was our attitude word. Back in Borderlands 1, it was Verhoeven. And that's how we kind of got to our like ultra violent, over the top Mortal Kombat-like levels of gore, which I love. That's why I made a big deal about making sure the creature team made the enemies come apart really well in Borderlands 4. But as we've gotten older, that word doesn't have the same meaning to, you know, some of the younger people who have come onto Gearbox, so I just use the word badass. And that's not about like the enemies having badass enemies, it's about the character feeling, the player feeling like a badass, and the world feeling badass. Does this thing look badass? Do you want to go to this area? Does it look cool? Does it look interesting? Does your action skill make you feel like a badass? Are the enemies and the characters in the world have a sense of attitude that you can like is memorable? And so yeah, badass became that key term this time around. And I think the team did a great job of looking at all of their work and how can they make something badass, and that can go from animation to audio effects, level design, level art, concept art, I mean, you name it, like all parts of the game, you can have something that's badass. And I think that really helped the team kind of pull it together.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
Some of the ways that we've improved on some of the mechanics is, you know, in our guns, obviously, with a game of guns, with billions of possible weapon combinations that you can get from loot. And we've introduced licensed parts this time around. So now, instead of each manufacturer kind of doing their own individual feature, now we have the idea that you could get a Maliwan gun that has Jacob's crit headshot ricochet damage, and whenever you throw it on reload, it sprouts legs and takes off like a Tediore. So we have multiple manufacturers that can roll together and really make things more impactful and more badass whenever we're in combat.
That was a ton of work, and we actually have a whole team dedicated to that. Asia and Jimmy Barnett are two folks who've been working with our weapons systems and teams for years on the last couple of games even, and you can see it. They have so we use Miro extensively. It's a great software. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's almost infinite resolution. So you can like have as many images on a board as you want, and it MIPs the resolution on those, so you can zoom in and out. So it can look like from a distance just a huge wall of little blips, but as you get closer and closer, you can see like the detail in them. And they have this giant matrix of like every single part and every manufacturer all built out. It looks like some beautiful mind shit where you can really like just see everything and how those parts come together, and they really study the hell out of them. Every single one of them get like, before they get like an initial concept, but the other thing I think a lot of people don't initially think about, like if you see a concept for a weapon, usually you're always seeing the side of it, but in reality, in a first-person shooter, that's not how players see the weapons 90% of the game. So you end up having to design every one of those multiple times from the side so it looks cool in profile, but then also how the player's going to see them, which is down the barrel, and that changes everything, because then all of that room you had like this gets condensed down to this much space, so you have to really design it so it reads and feels cool from that view. And so those folks for the entire, how long was the development on this, like 5-6 years, just spent all that time doing that over and over again, double concepting, blocking out, testing them extensively all the time. And so the whole weapons team really just owned that.
Borderlands 4, I love the licensed part feature. I love enhancements because it really goes into and plays really well with the type of guns that you want to use, and it works really well with the licensed part system. Because now if I love playing with Jacobs or Maliwan, it doesn't matter if I get a gun that has multiple weapon parts, as long as one of those parts is a Jacobs or Maliwan, then I can find an enhancement that plays with that style. I really enjoy that.
Obviously, yes, we have procedural generation that puts the guns together, and we have like so many attributes that can kind of twist and turn based on, you know, as we turn those dials and those numbers change. But more than anything this time around, we wanted to make all of the guns feel unique and not just like a kind of a subtle stat change. So when looking at the manufacturers, we were like, how can we make all these guns feel different and still have the manufacturer identities be important? And that's when we came up with the licensed behavior system. And so now, if you come from a previous Borderlands game, maybe you're a Jacobs fan and you really love how Jacob weapons feel. They have that critical ricochet. Like if you get a crit, you'll ricochet that bullet to another enemy. How could we get that behavior on more guns? And once we were like, okay, let's make these behaviors licensed. So now you could have a Maliwan weapon drop with the Jacobs licensed part, and now all your elemental weapon bullets are also ricocheting. And then you could layer on like Torg bullets on top of that, and maybe when you reload, they all explode. And once we did that, now all the guns have these random combinations of behaviors that are immediately felt, and it's not just a number change. You still identify the manufacturer because they each have their own brand, and we put the icons right on the item card to really inform, like, this thing is doing this because of this manufacturer. It lets you play with guns in a way that we've never had before, and now you can be like, I love Jacob's behavior, and now every gun on the game that drops could be viable to you. It could be a Vladoff gun, but it's still, if it has that Jacobs part, now you care about that Vladoff gun that you might have ignored in the previous game. And so, and like I said, fundamentally, it gives each gun itself a different feel. And so that number, yes, 30 billion guns sounds like, oh, it's just number changes. This time, more than any previous game, the guns fundamentally feel different each time you pick one up. And I think that's a great success case. Like, that was one of our goals, and I think our gear team like knocked it out of the park.
I would compare the tone of Borderlands 4 to Borderlands 3 whenever we're looking at the tone and some of the narrative and story that we've been driving to be a little bit more serious in tone whenever we're talking about the stakes and the main missions that you're going through, but it's not without its witticisms and its humor and kind of goofiness in our side missions or in the banter that goes back and forth with player characters whenever they're on their missions.
We didn't want to get rid of the humor in the game. We still wanted that, but we wanted like a simple and dark enough tone for like the main story that's like able to not only like interest the player enough to pull them through it, but also remember what was going on, because you do get, you know, sidetracked and waylaid quite a bit with all these side quests. And so for us, it was just fun, because those are the things that are, to me, like natural for the Borderlands universe and the art style. I mean, our art style allows for all kinds of different moods and different tones to that. And so we try to provide all the tools, and then, you know, it's like basically building a toolbox of different parts and pieces for these guys to work with.
Yeah, I think some of the examples that we can talk about where the tone is more serious is whenever you're facing off against any of the Timekeeper's commanders. You know, in the past, maybe some of the enemies or those bosses would be more jokey or memey, but on this, we felt that because of the world and because of the stakes that are going on Kairos and how they've been, you know, subjugated to the Timekeeper's rule, it felt more wise for each of them to be able to tell their own stories with a more serious tone into why they're doing it. You know, Idolater Saul has a very different reason on his motivations than what Callus, the Ripper Queen, would.
I mean, every time we do a Borderlands, we do try to like push different themes or tones or characters. Like you know, we've spoken about the shift for BL4, but there was a shift from BL1 to BL2. And there was another shift from BL2 to BL3. So this wasn't necessarily like a new thing, but, you know, we wanted to kind of go back to something a little more grounded with stakes that the players could feel and that the player could be more of the hero. You know, one of the critiques we got from Borderlands 3 was at times you felt like you were not participating in the story. You were just a viewer, you were watching it. You know, it's like, my character was there, they could have done something. You know, going into Borderlands 4, you know, we wanted to make sure we addressed some of that critique. And so now you see your characters in the cinematic, and it's your character with whatever cosmetics you have on, it's you that's in the story being a part of it.
And then when they go out and they get into their pods, which is like a one representative from each of the different departments, get together and work on these different zones, they actually get to use those pieces and parts to build out an area that tries to match or support the story and the tone that they want there. And so then we just constantly are working it and reworking, making sure that toolbox is big enough and has enough pieces for them to write the stories they want to. And so it really is a big team collaboration.
We wanted to have stakes. We wanted to make sure players felt motivated, and the motivations of the characters in the world also met motivations of what the player might have. And so to do that, we wanted to be like, yeah, there's bad guys who do some bad things, and you hate them and you want to see them be defeated. You want to save this populace of Kairos. You want to rally the troops, so to speak. And so we felt the best way to do that, to add those stakes, was to have a tone that's more grounded, a little darker at times, so that those stakes could be established and felt. And so when there's an action and there's a consequence, that consequence is meaningful in terms of what might happen to the characters in the world. And then, we still love humor though. Like there's still tons of humor in Borderlands. That's another thing a lot of people think is like, oh, they're all dour, and it's like not the case. In the campaign, there's still moments of levity and humor, but it's all tied to the situations within the game as opposed to kind of relying on pop culture to like push the gag. The humor should be established in the world and funny because of what's happening in the world as opposed to what's happening in reality.
Time to bolt. We could have made something special!
So some of the decisions that I've had to make as senior project producer, along with my leadership team, is things like our engine. Do we move forward to Unreal 5? Once we started looking at a lot of the goals that we wanted to be able to meet with this game and some of our pillars, and with performance, expanding our gameplay, our combat, our movement suite, it became evident that we wanted to go into Unreal 5 because it had so many more technical options for us to be able to explore. Even allowed us the ability to have more robust zones and our seamless world to be able to operate that way as well.
Borderlands has always had a pseudo open world design or seamless world. Like we tried to fake it, before the art switch back on BL1, we had a world that was seamless, but our ambition in terms of the scope and scale just couldn't work on that level of technology, on the 360 era, UE3 era.
Well, the art style has evolved in Borderlands 4 by like really just leaning into tech. There was just a lot of things that we were really kind of limited in the past due to being a 4-player co-op game, and then all the consoles that depending on the generation we're coming out on, you have a lot of restrictions there too. And Unreal, it just allows us to do things that we were never able to do before. The amount of like foliage and detail and lighting even, a lot of people think we're cel shaded, we're actually not. Our textures have some lighting information in them, so they have the appearance of it, but they actually use real PBR lighting standards. So it's actually the most beautiful Borderlands we ever made. Like you actually get all the bloom and the god rays and all the effects and stuff you would out of like a very realistic game, but rendered in a very stylized way whenever we ink everything and put our own stylization stamp to our textures. And so it actually feels more stylized than actually the rendering engine is doing. It's a lot of trickery that looks really cool when it comes together. So it is just a better representation of what we always wanted it to be.
Seamless is a good keyword because it speaks to like the whole player experience and not just the world. But for the world, as a level designer, like even on BL3, every mission, I would count the number of loading screens that you'd have to pass through to complete a mission. And I basically told the mission team, there's like a hard cap. You can't have more than like 2, maybe 3 loading screens on like a campaign mission. Otherwise, cut your mission in half because that's too long, that's too many loading screens, there's too many interruptions. So going into Borderlands 4, I wanted to have a seamless experience where the game didn't give you an opportunity to put down the controller. Every time you saw a loading screen, that was like, okay, I've reached a new area, I can put the controller down. This time around, I wanted to make sure that there weren't those excuses and those interruptions. Like I said, it also speaks to the player experience. You get mission rewards directed into your inventory through a reward center. You can change your character's action skill, capstones and augments as well on the fly without having to respec your whole tree. It was just like, seamless became a key word for the entire experience. On the surface, yes, the world is the most obvious example of that, but it was actually just a whole key term for the entire game. So the new traversal mechanics, we wanted to create the seamless world. We wanted to have ways to explore it and traverse it differently than just being on foot or just mantling. So, early goal was to develop the grapple hook, the glide, the double jump, all these new things. It kind of struggled for a little bit until we realized those are all good tools for combat. And I love people being in combat. If I had my way, you'd always be shooting all the time, but I know that would be overwhelming for most players. Pacing matters. But once we started looking at those traversal mechanics in terms of our combat and integrating them into our combat loop, then it started to feel natural, and those ideas felt correct for Borderlands. So you can use grapple, to get to a high elevation for some kind of advantage. You can use it to literally swing across a whole combat space. So if you're playing like a melee-based character or a shotgun-based character, now you can grapple and jump across a whole arena and be in someone's face immediately. So once we started looking at those things in terms of combat and like packing the world with that density, then those started to feel more natural. Same thing for glide. Glide was primarily just an exploration tool, but once we let you do it from like basically jump height or any height, then it just felt natural and you start to do it naturally. And then the level designers kind of went to town developing like, oh, it'd be really cool if I put this place over here that you can glide to, or you can grapple, jump out of the grapple and then glide and use that momentum to take you further. But it really started to click in terms of world building when it all came back to like, how do we make these things feel good for combat? And then the level designers just kind of populated that throughout the world kind of more naturally. When looking at our Vault Hunters, I wanted to make sure we added more depth to the game, and that's why our action skill system is as deep. Nick Thurston was the character lead that I worked with on this stuff. We wanted to add more depth to the game, but I never wanted to step it into like complexity for complexity's sake. And so what we started to do is look at all the characters in terms of a range of complexity or a range of depth.
Unlike any of you, I have seen what emerges from those arches. I have watched them tear 100 soldiers apart in seconds. I have felt their teeth on my bones. I have lost enough, and now must walk alone.
Amon's my personal favorite. I've never been a huge guy, so like and to me, Vault Hunters are all about like hero fantasy fulfillment kind of thing. And so ever since Brick, that was one of the first characters I made in the new art style. I've always loved those great big bruiser kind of guys, and it was actually a lot of contention whenever I first actually thought, no, make them bigger because we have things to worry about like half height cover and things like that. And so there's all kinds of camera issues that go into play that I hadn't even considered. But yeah, I love them. I mean, Space Vikings, you can't go wrong with that.
You're stuck here, alone, with the demons.
So Amon has, you can bring up the button and throw axes pretty quickly. You can bring up Scourge, which brings up the shield and the whip. But he also has the fist. And as you build out the action skill for any one of those, they become more complex. You go into that tree and it gets way more depth, but at the surface, it's still super approachable.
Just leave it to me.
Thanks for shopping at Mass Market Appeal.
Hey, just this.
Sure.
Vex was actually the first one. Early on, like we always try to get one so we can start testing all the systems as soon as possible. So we took her the furthest along. And then the other ones all kind of grew up at the same time. We have a lot of different concept artists that are super talented, and multiple people were all working and iterating, and all the characters pass back and forth between different concept artists at one time or another. So yeah, the rest of them after Vex all came about at the same time.
Stupid little bitch!
I love Vex. I'm really proud of how we looked at her. So every game has a siren. That's kind of a Borderlands thing, is we have a siren on the mainline titles. A siren was our representation of the mage fantasy from the RPG side of the world, right? They have this phase energy, it's very magic based. But each game we want to twist how that fantasy is realized. And so when I was looking at Vex, it kind of dawned on me, instead of looking at her through like the lens of a mage fantasy, it was more of a witch fantasy. So still lots of magic, but that's where trouble actually came from, is witches have a familiar and a cat, and I happen to be kind of a cat person. So I was like, that sounds like a great twist on the siren mage fantasy, is to make it more like a witch and have this familiar always out as one of her action skills. And we do that to all, we have the exo soldier, same thing. We always typically have a soldier-like class, but we always want to twist it game to game, so you can still, like on the surface, kind of have a broad expectation, but then as you explore the character and you see what we've done, you're still seeing something new and inventive, and not just like resting on what we've done before.
Vex, we for what we call internally Dark Siren. It's not like an official term because they're all still just sirens. But we wanted to do something that felt a little more emo, a little darker, and a pet class, which we've never done a siren as a pet class before. So it was really a collaboration of what the designers wanted to do and what the character artists wanted to do too. Where we wanted to take what the expectation was and just give it like a little bit a darker twist to it. I mean, that was kind of like a through line for a good part of the development of the game, is like, can we make it back to being a little darker and a little more serious and grittier than it was in the previous one. So that was an attempt to try and make sure we did that with our characters as well as the world.
Yeah, pretty much.
Call me Rafa, sir.
He was a long drawn out story on how we even got to where it was. That was a fun one too. Again, there was like some undeniable that it's more difficult to add character to a character you can't see their face. And so we actually had multiple different versions early on where we had like his face exposed, and everyone loved it. He loved the character. He looks awesome and everything. And Narrative went and they wrote a whole bunch of lines about him talking about how handsome he is and everything, you know, about like what a good-looking, suave guy he was. But when we were looking at the lineup, we felt like we needed somebody that, you know, had a little more mystery to him, you know.
Rafa is no one's savings. Rafa is free.
Rafa, you know, he has the TDR dead frame suit on. We like the idea of having kind of charismatic character who kind of YOLO or YOLT from the character trailer. That was, you know, recognized he could potentially die at any time. And what would that mean for this character who's like a soldier based? And so, and with what, you know, TDR as a whole concept is also like throwaway, right? We call them the superstore equivalent of a gun manufacturer, where it's all about use it and throw it and get rid of it. And so, you know, looking at Rafa's skill tree, there's some kind of names for skills and whatnot that harken back to like that kind of corporate throwaway mentality. That story really influenced the idea of who Rafa's personality was, and then we took that personality and we tried to put it into the action skill and the skill tree itself, so that there's like, you know, we care about cohesion, consistency in our storytelling, and it creates great world building. All of the Vault Hunters this time around, going through those character trailers that we released, really add a layer of depth that we've always had in our lore, but not as directly expressed as we've done this time around. And so, like, if you watch those trailers and then you play these characters in the game, and you go through their action skills, you're gonna see like, oh, this is not just a player character, this is a character. And as you go through the action skill tree, you're gonna make that character your own interpretation. All of the characters have that kind of storytelling built into them, and Rafa's a very overt one with having the TDR suit, but all the characters kind of have that approach this time around.
What part aren't you getting? I am alive. See, I have been given a second chance. I may die at any moment. That is why I live carefree. You know, YOLO, as they say.
We made the decision like fairly late, like, oh no, let's do the masked version of him. And I think he looks so much cooler like that. Like, those are the kind of characters I usually like to play so much, like the assassins, that kind of thing. And so like the fact that we actually hid his face was like a big point of contention, because, you know, we have the cinematics, we actually see the characters now even. They were so bothered because now we have all these cinematics where we got the camera right in the player's face and he's wearing a helmet the whole time. And so it was like a lot of back and forth and arguing for it, but I think we chose the right thing. The reality is players can choose their own heads and swap it out if they want the exposed version, but like a man of mystery, a badass assassin with augmented bodies, like that's a fantasy for sure for a lot of people, and I'm one of them. So.
Time to take back what's mine.
Harlow is the most fun. So we always, like I said, with that tone conversation, for me and a lot of the team, the way we try to think of it is it's supposed to be a ratio, you know? Like, we want that fun, but if everything is wacky and weird and playful and cute, it takes away from the danger in the universe. And so whenever we have someone that is like more playful and more fun in general, like, they should be special. They should feel special, and that's really what she is. She's like the most fun and playful character in the lineup, even though she's got like a dark and twisted history. Like, her attitude towards the world, how unaffected she is, and like her optimism and everything was something we just wanted for someone in that 4-player lineup. We gotta have that person too, because I mean, compared to the other ones, they're all pretty dark and serious, you know? So a genius inventor that's got a bubbly and charismatic outlook on the world is just something unique and fun we wanted for that lineup.
We doing this?
Yeah, we're doing this.
Harlow comes from Maliwan, and Maliwan's like a beloved manufacturer for like the actual gameplay and the elemental effects. Working on Borderlands 3, for some reason, and it's great, the Trant enemy or boss in the game kind of became a meme within the community and as a memorable boss character. And early in her designs, there was definitely like calls to Maliwan, and so we just started to embrace that and let her play with technology in a way that only Maliwan could, because they're like our most advanced manufacturer in terms of technology level. That's why they have the elemental switch, and all their guns are element based, which are very techy. And so we kind of let her play with technology on a very extreme that we've never done in the Borderlands before. We've tended to have a very like high-tech world that fell apart and got recobbled back together to work. But she's kind of like not that. She's literally the like epitome of high technology in her world, and that's why, you know, her action skill of stasis, people say it's like phase lock. We would have never allowed another character to have that level of high technology in our world, but this time around we were like, okay, Maliwan's a fun manufacturer, the Trants are a big character in our community. Let's go ahead and explore that with this character and let us play with technology in a way that we haven't. And still, again, it calls back to our lore and to our world in a way that feels natural and doesn't kind of break our environment rules or our history rules of like, what is the technology of the Borderlands?
So this is just my laptop, and yeah, I've got a dashboard. I'm probably not going to flash it to you guys, but I should probably look at it. I've got a dashboard here, all the launch telemetry, and I haven't looked at it for a few minutes. So thanks for reminding me, because we are in it right now. Holy shit. Since the last time I looked at this, our concurrent users have gone up by 2.5 times.
It's all black box magic how you launch a game on the back end. No, we have a really close communication with our partnerships team, with our first party team rather, to be able to know when and make sure that people on the first party side know when it's good to go. And then they communicate that. A lot of it's set on timers, or some of it is manual, depending on the platform. And you just say, yep, we're all ready to go, and everybody gets ready and embraces for impact, and hoping that not anything falls down on the back end or anything. And so far, so good for us.
Long. I couldn't fall asleep last night. I think I fell asleep at 1:30, and then I was up at 5:30. We had the review embargo drop, had console start going live, we had PC users go live. So we've been all down in the war room, watching all the numbers, seeing all the feedback, reading all the reviews, looking at what the community's reaction's been, watching. We have like many streams up, and we're watching all these streamers.
7 a.m. Central Time is when the first territory, New Zealand, was going to be able to purchase and download and play the console version of Borderlands 4. So I set my alarm for 6, got myself out of bed, got myself sorted, and I don't think I slept well last night. I was probably up until 2 or 3 a.m. Normally I go to sleep between midnight and 1 a.m. But I was up till like 2 or 3 a.m. last night, and then woke up at 6, so I'm on 3-4 hours of sleep. Got myself sorted, came into the office, jumped into the war room.
Before I came in for this interview, we were down in a war room.
I've got a dashboard here, which we're all using this. So there's a war room here where we've got a whole bunch of people. We're looking at this dashboard and some others that we've customized. There's another war room in Novato in the Bay Area of California where 2K HQ is, and they're all looking at the same thing. And what's on here is showing the telemetry of what's going on with the game. So I can see concurrent users, I can see concurrent users for platform, I can see concurrent users per territory. Like every country, I can see where people are playing. But more importantly, I get more detailed information about the actual services, because we're running a lot of, we have this, we call it Shift, which is the public-facing name for an online infrastructure that allows all kinds of interesting stuff to happen. It allows people to play cooperative together. It allows for cross-play. It allows for all of the stuff that, like, if I give out a shift code and people get golden keys in the game, it's an online infrastructure that connects every player to us and potentially every player to every other player to whatever degree they want to. It's an online infrastructure with a whole bunch of services, and we have like 24 little components that are running this, and like I'm tracking the total requests that happen from a user to one of the APIs, and that firing off, it shows how much data is moving in and out, and it also will show if there's any like anomalies or hiccups, and it's pretty freaking smooth.
I feel like his stress levels went down when he got the laptop back out.
Yeah. No, I mean, because you never know. Like, there's a moment, like when I'm like, did something happen in the time that we were talking? Something bad, and it's good, man. We got a good launch, man. This is going really, really well.
We have Zoom calls with over at 2K and here, and folks joining in remote from our Spark teams, and there's actually a couple of different rooms, but myself, the creative director, Randy, and several of our leadership team is down there, kind of looking at things as the switches kind of click on, seeing how different platforms are rolling on, different regions are rolling on. So we can make sure if something happens on one of our back-end services, people are able to actually get into the game. People are able to match make, all of those different things we want to make sure are there, and we can quickly resolve if something ends up happening, because you can't really test millions of people playing the game at one time until launch time.
That's fascinating to me too, to see how players actually engage in their game, the parts that they're interested in. Like, we make all these cosmetics, we constantly have the conversation about how much time should we actually spend making a first player character have cosmetics, because you don't see yourself except for in your menus and stuff. Getting to see how players actually play our game is awesome. And we're working on a lot of content still. We're still supporting Borderlands well beyond just the launch. And so it really was just a mad dash at trying to catch up with everybody really quick, and then running to the airport 3 times to pick up friends and family all coming to the release party. So I got a full house. I got 12 people staying in my house right now. So yeah, it was mad, but it was awesome too. I mean, waking up right away in the morning and reading reviews and people's reactions, that's the stuff we die for. So it was awesome, good and bad. I love reading it.
I felt in my heart going into today that we had a better game than Borderlands 3. I was really confident in that, and thankfully, the critical review has been that so far, and the community's early reaction has also been that. So like, it's stressful, but it's also like been exciting as much as it's been stressful, because I've wanted to share this game with people since we started showing it, earlier this year, because I knew that my experience with the franchise over all these years was going to, and all of the team's effort, the incredible effort of all the team members, was leading to a game that we could be really proud about. And whether you are a returning Borderlands fan or were just thinking about getting into it, this was a place to have that moment again in Borderlands. So it's been intense but exciting.
The Borderlands franchise means so much to me. It was the first game that I worked on here, Borderlands 2 was, and so I kind of attached myself to it really quickly, and just love the passion and the creativity that goes into it. And just working at Gearbox alone, all of the people from the ground up are amazing, and everybody is a part of the process. I was just talking with someone yesterday about how everyone's been able to pitch ideas or come up with different pieces of feedback to make things better, to tweak this or iterate on that. Even whenever I was in QA, I was able to pitch design 2 DLC characters in one of our previous games, and that meant a lot to me, because that showed how everyone here really matters. And whenever I bring that over to the Borderlands franchise, it's really cool to see everyone's creativity firing on all cylinders and coming up with crazy stuff and really cool missions or fun mechanics, and a lot of secrets that are in there too. So it's really exciting to me.
That all takes tons of people's time and effort and creativity as well. So, it's just, games are a lot of hard work, and it's easy to like, when you just go to a store and pick it up, to kind of like not understand the scope and scale of effort it takes to do a game. So like anyone who's shipping a game these days, it's an accomplishment just to recognize that what you're playing is, you know, the result of hundreds, if not thousands of people's hard work and dedication, and always wanting to do the best. Like no one goes out to make a bad game or unsuccessful game. And, you know, just keep that in mind. Like games are hard to make, they're fun to play. Don't take things like, nothing is easy. Nothing is easy, and just hope that they can appreciate that.
You know, it's interesting that we're just getting started in this medium. Like this medium's so cool. The dawn of the information age and just discovering that we can make computers led to us building a new medium with interactive entertainment. It's the first time we've been able to invite the audience to change and affect and participate in the feeling of the creative experience as opposed to just parsing it passively. Like, you know, from the cave drawings on the walls to great literature to even film, television, and music, it's always kind of a passive experience where the artist makes the thing and then you look at it and everything interactive is just happening in your brain, or with however much time you're choosing to spend to it. Like I mean, with a book, I guess I could technically read it out of order. I'd be lying if I said that there's never been a book where I didn't jump to the end and then go back and read the thing. So there is some interactivity there, but we've got this new medium, this interactive medium, and we're just figuring it out. We're just at the beginning. And there's a way that we use this medium right now to reach people, and we've got consoles and we've got computers and there's now phones, and there's lots of different kind of angles on that. You know, there's people in this world that will not play a video game unless it's a premium video game and they have to pay for it up front. There's other people that will not play a video game unless it's free and they could download it on their phone for free and see if they even enjoy it first. And both of these people exist in the same world. And then there's people that will do any of it, right? Like, or none of it. To make a game like Borderlands 4 takes a big investment. It's a massive, massive game. Hundreds and hundreds of people for years. And that's very expensive. It's very expensive. The budgets of our big video games now are larger than the budgets of blockbuster movies. You can't easily make that decision to commit those kinds of resources towards a thing, whether you're the person that has the cash or you're any individual on that team to decide to commit that portion of your life to that endeavor, unless you believe everybody involved, from the hourly QA person to the guy at the top of the chairman of a publicly traded company that has to commit the capital. And everybody in between. It can only happen if everybody in that loop believes that what is being imagined has more value to exist in the world than what it takes to create it, which means you both need the idea of what it takes to create it, the belief in what it takes to create it, and a sense of what it might be worth if it was created. And everybody has to have that understanding or that it just doesn't work. And I love that I'm in it, and I love that we're just getting started. When I say we, I'm talking about like the whole industry together. Like we haven't even had our Citizen Kane yet, let alone, you know, Jurassic Park or Star Wars. Like we're just figuring this shit out. But it's fun.